We're all about the Archers, and we are thrilled to welcome today the wonderful Alison Dowling, who plays the character we love so much, Elizabeth Pargetter. Alison, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Hello, one and all.
Hello.
Yeah.
Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you.
Alison, what was it, do you think, that first attracted Elizabeth to the multimillionaire meat dealer Vince Casey?
What can I say? He was the best that was around. You know, he was a fine man.
It's just we interviewed Tony Turner, who of course plays Vince, and he thinks Elizabeth is way out of Vince's league. Presumably, you agree.
Well, all I say is he's a prime pick in the meat market, and she is a single woman. So you know, she's he's cut above the rest.
Yes,
Lovely Tony. I've missed him because we haven't been in the studio together for a while. But yeah, he's a great actor and a really good character. I love anything that's kind of authentically Midlands or country. You know, I think it's important to the programme to keep that heritage going. It's a Midlands based programme.
but do you think his money did have a factor in attracting Elizabeth at all?
Personally, no, I don't think it did. I think she's lacked laughter in her life for a long time, and they met and he made her laugh. And you know, having been 30 years with my partner and still laughing, he makes me laugh. I think it's a very important ingredient for a happy union.
Yeah, that's really lovely. Well, seeing as we've jumped straight in with Vince, I'm going to ask, what do you think Nigel would make of Vince?
That's an interesting one. I think once they got over the differences, shall we say, they'd probably enjoy a pint of Shires together. Yeah, I mean, chalk and cheese.
Yes.
Yes, goodness me. I mean, this is your 40th year. It's a huge achievement, Alison. Can you remember the first few days on set when you were recording?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd never done radio drama before. I'd done a lot of voiceovers. I'd worked with Kenny Everett, done a lot of voice work, but I hadn't been part of radio drama. So I took the train from London to Birmingham, very excited, with a scene to record. And Norman Painting, who, of course, played Phil so wonderfully, who actually created Elizabeth on and off air, because he was a writer at the time of The Archers. So he created and wrote Elizabeth and named her after the Queen. And he was there. That's who I did my scenes with. And he was lovely, so helpful. And then when I got the job and joined the cast, I was immersed with radio royalty because it was Norman and the wonderful Paddy Green, who plays Elizabeth's mother. And she was so kind and generous and taught me all the little techniques and nuances to make the words and the scenes hopefully lift from the page, and also to not bang into the furniture and basic things like that. And I thought I had to open the doors and pop the champagne corks, but of course there's a huge team of people that make the program behind the scenes as well. So the spot effects person, I learned to work alongside them like a shadow. There was a lot to learn, and they were all very, very generous in helping me. And I've tried to do that with the actors that then came along to play Elizabeth's children, Lily and Freddie, who again were not experienced, and it's lovely to be able to do that.
You sort of mothered them. I mean, you've just mentioned your fictional mother, Jill. I have to say, some of my favourite scenes are when the siblings, you, David, Shula, and Kenton, get together to reminisce. We've had a couple of them in recently, but I think it's a very useful vehicle, isn't it? Because it fills in the backstory for those of us who've forgotten one or two details, but also for those newer listeners who have no idea. Do you enjoy those scenes?
Oh, very much so, because there's a natural dynamic. We've known each other for a long time. So my radio sister Shula, played by Judy Bennett, we're great friends. It's you get to know each other over 40 years. And Tim Bentinck, who plays David, he and I worked together on The Archers for 40 years, but we also worked together a lot in London on other projects. But yes, I think it's those relationships are natural. You don't realize it till you come to do it, and it's just spontaneous the way you bounce off each other, because we're very close. Not only as characters but as mates.
I mean, obviously Kenton winds David up by calling him Dave.
Yes.
Do you think it would really wind Elizabeth up if he called you Lizzie?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those hard and fast rules. The only person that calls Elizabeth Lizzie was Nigel. That's right. I mean, it may change, and as new writers come in, you don't know how much gets lost in translation, and they're not aware of some of that historic stuff. But then as an actor in studio, it's your opportunity to bring it up and say, oh, actually, he doesn't call me that, etc.
Right.
If you weren't playing Elizabeth, which of your other siblings would you like to be?
Ooh.
With their different roles and everything.
Probably Kenton, because he's sort of the nearest opposite sex, but the nearest version of Elizabeth. He's slightly troublesome and divisive and funny and loves life. And he was the one that shouldered her through the mental health crisis. She opened up to him quite a lot. And those were some lovely, memorable scenes for me, working with Richard, doing that. Yeah. I think it really exposed how close they were as a brother and sister.
Alison, I don't know about you, but I've not been able to look at a tent the same way since your experience with the late, great Ian Pepperell. I mean, did you have fun recording those scenes?
Oh, yeah, we did. We absolutely did. Yeah, and Ian was a marvellous actor, and it was great to have those scenes with him, because that whole story, our characters hadn't ever really spoken to each other, as is the case with a programme like The Archers. You tend to speak to the same characters, and there's probably a lot of characters that Elizabeth's never spoken to, and vice versa. So it was really new territory, especially given the nature of the relationship then ensued. Yeah.
Were you quite shocked when you picked that script up?
Oh yeah. Yeah. But Ian and I enjoyed it tremendously, and Sean O'Connor, who was the editor at the time, he was very helpful in what he wanted, because it was his idea and the intensity of the thing, and it was, I think, in a period of grief, sometimes people do things that are totally out of character, because they're suddenly abandoned from that umbilical cord that has defined them, and they're just testing the boundaries, and lose their head, whatever you want to say. But it was an very interesting storyline.
Yeah. Got tongues wagging, Alison. Got tongues wagging.
It certainly did. Anything for drama and conflict. That's what it gave. And the triangle as well, of course, because it impacted his family life, and Elizabeth's later, children. Made it very difficult for Lily and Freddie.
You mentioned just now that there are some characters you don't really have any scenes with.
Yes.
Which other Ambridge characters would you like to have some scenes with that, on the whole, you tend not to, or who you've never had scenes with?
All of them. Well, because it's lovely to work with different actors all the time and see what they bring today. But kind of unofficially, the ones who I think will be nice to have a drink with after work as well. Yeah. Because, as you wrap up then you sometimes, get a bit of socialising. But I think it's always good to put characters that don't generally talk to each other together. Because that's like real life, and you have to find a level on which you communicate, and suddenly you find common ground, and it opens up interesting dynamics, I think.
But if I had to push you on one, Alison, who would it be?
Okay, when we come back to that.
All right.
You offend anyone?
I can't even think of one, so I don't know.
Joy, maybe.
Too many tangents.
Yeah, Joy.
Might be a good one, yeah.
I think you had the scene with her when she was doing the naked painting, wasn't
she?
she?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was
What's
fun.
these? Whose are these?
Yes.
I remember it quite well. At that time that we recorded that, I think, thankfully, it was in a studio at home because it was COVID when we were doing this.
Oh,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
so there wasn't even any potential
No.
for...
And do you have many scenes with the Carters? I'm trying to think. I suppose, yeah, some of them, I guess. Yeah, Chelsea.
Yeah, a
Emma,
little bit,
yeah,
because she
little
was
bit,
working
yeah.
Yeah, but they're often the kind of, you're there, she's there kind of.
Yeah.
We just,
Yeah.
have the pleasantries, but nothing beyond that.
Unless you're Roy. Yeah.
Yeah. He certainly had his appeal.
So you've played Elizabeth for so long, and she's had so many kind of ups and downs throughout her life. Has she kind of become a bit of your alter ego?
Yeah, well, there's a lot that you can't help but relate to your character, as you go through life's trials, and tribulations and losses and joys. Yeah, so by now, I'm sure there's quite a bit of Ali and Elizabeth and vice versa. But, I'm a girl from South London, and she's a farmer's daughter who did all right, and ended up in a stately home. But we both became mothers. We've both had life's, obstacles to overcome. So there's a lot to mirror and draw on.
I mean, I love the independence of Elizabeth at some times, but I worry that she's often viewed by who she's in a relationship with, Cameron, Nigel, Roy, Vince. Do you feel that, or do you feel she is strongly independent?
I think she's strongly independent, and also if you did the ones you've just mentioned, they're all so different, such different men. So that's interesting. She doesn't necessarily have a type or is drawn, as you mentioned earlier, Gwendolen, was it the money of Vince Casey? I think it's the individual. I think she's very honest, and if she likes someone, she likes them. If she doesn't, she won't pursue it further. And also, after she lost Nigel, obviously all that mattered to her was keeping Lower Loxley going, which was a huge challenge, and still is. And looking after those children who'd lost their father. So it was enough to push anyone over the edge, which is why she was in denial for so long, I'm sure. And it was a lovely slow burn. She kept going, till eventually, Mother Nature took over and, she broke down. And there was Ifti as well. There's been a few over the years, very different people that she was attracted to.
Talking of Elizabeth's breakdown, her depression, do you think that storyline was dealt with too quickly? There was a lot of chatter about, that's been and gone, that the Ambridge fairy had sprinkled her magic dust and it was all resolved too quickly. Do you think it was done too quickly?
No, I strongly disagree. I think her decline happened very slowly. She didn't really grieve after the loss of her father. Like most of us, she put on a brave face. She lost Nigel. There was too much to deal with, and she pushed it under. And for a good few years, it seemed like there'd been a funeral. She'd had a few tears, and then she's over it. She wasn't over it.
No.
And they very cleverly never really touched on her grief.
I agree.
Then when it did happen, it was quite slow. She seemingly recovered quickly. I think that was the criticism.
Yeah.
But it's a radio show with an enormous cast, and you can't. Once the writers did that episode where it was just Elizabeth and the counsellor, and we had the backstory for those that didn't know Elizabeth so well, and it touched on all the history for those that did, and suddenly remembered, oh yes, there's that. She found him on the doorstep. I mean, that's hugely traumatic. So yes, she had counselling, and clearly she was in a position to pay for it, but she went on to have more counselling, but we just didn't hear it on air. So I think it's somewhat unfair, because the writers have to move on to other characters, other stories. But there's still signs every now and again of her, dealing with her anxiety and doing all the things that she was taught to self-manage those moments.
It's just that if you compare it to, there is scope, isn't there, with the Alice alcoholism storyline for it to go on for a long time. So they will expand the storyline for ages if they so feel.
If they so wish, yeah. And also, sometimes people recover but slip back again.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's
Right.
open, I suppose, to depending on what life throws at her.
So I guess Elizabeth might slip back again. We don't know. We don't know.
No. There's no sign of it at the moment.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always there, scarily. You just never know, do you?
And for any of us, you know, you just don't know what's going to tip someone over the edge at any given point. But it was something that was, you know, aired and talked about. And it was the catalyst, once she saw the counsellor, to unlock so much that she'd been bottling up.
Yeah.
Definitely. Talking about the Nigel storyline, how did you find out? Did you just read it in the script, a bit like the Roy one, just not as funny to read, or were you told? Did they have a discussion with you to do with that?
Graham was told, but they don't give you months in advance. And then, you know, he and I were both told, and he discussed it with me, and then we had the horrible task of having to, you know, play it out. But as an actor, you're just hired to say the lines on the page, and anything beyond that, you're really not really part of. And we never know, you know, where we're booked on a monthly basis. There's no retainer as such, so it's a two-way thing with the BBC and with the actors, that you get booked for the next month, and you think, oh, what's going to happen now in these scripts, and that's it. Sometimes, like, I knew that I was going to do this one episode with the counsellor, Jeremy, the editor. You know, we spoke about that. But on the whole, it's down to whoever's running the programme and what they decide to do with it, and which storylines they want to forge ahead with.
One storyline with Elizabeth that drove me absolutely batty was her handling of poor Freddie and the trustees, and I felt that she really gave in to the trustees and didn't take Freddie's side. I appreciate, as you say, you are there to read the lines, but did that at all affect you, or were you comfortable with the decision?
Yeah, I have to be comfortable, otherwise I can't play it. So even if at first I think, oh,
yes, true.
Why would she react like that? Oh, that doesn't make sense to me. The actor's job is to make it as authentically believable as possible. So you've got to commit to those lines and find a way, nuanced or otherwise, to convince yourself that that's her stance and this is why. You know, you look at those lines and you find you explore reasons as to why she would think or behave a certain way. You can't fight it, because, you know, you are playing that character, and that's what the writer's written and has been discussed and decided. So you've got to commit to it and go with it as best as you can. And there's always an argument to, you know, as to why a character's doing something, if you look into it.
Yes, that's true. In terms of the authenticity, I am constantly amazed by the cast, and yourself included in that, Alison, about how it's not just reading the words, it's about what sounds you make, the pauses. It's, in a way, the words are only a section of the work that goes into that performance. Does that take some time to decide when to do those extras?
Yeah, the actors will often, especially if they're not sure about or not really convinced with what they're saying, they'll play the subtext. Because in life, often we say things and we don't really mean what we're saying. For whatever reason, you can't actually say what you want to say. And it's the same, I think, if you explore that, it's easier to say things that you think with a degree of insincerity. So it's that's what I look for, and those pauses, those breaths are hopefully letting the listener know or question, did she mean that, or was there something she's thinking, even though she's saying that she means something else. Like we navigate in our relationships, you know, professional and private, you're treading on eggshells sometimes.
Just going back to the roof scene.
Yes.
The Radio 4 statistical programme, more or less, calculated the height of Lower Loxley to be 60 metres by the length of Nigel's scream.
Yes.
Now that equates to the height of York Minster. Is Lower Loxley that big, Alison?
Yes, of course it is. Dramatic license. It was a quality scream, wasn't it?
It's very high. It went a long time. Yeah.
Roof yet, I might say, and I'm hopefully not going there anytime soon.
No, please don't. Just stay where you are. We don't need that at all. So talking about Lower Loxley, do you see Vince taking over Lower Loxley to become his mob paradise and you end up being his mole?
No chance.
Correct.
Yeah, from the last scenes I remember recording, it's very much lovely when they're together, but nice to be able to, a bit like grandparents and grandkids, it's nice to go, okay, I think we'll have a little bit of me time and separate. Yeah. I don't think so. It's more fun for the writers, I'm sure, if they're not, because I think often, the writers, sometimes once they're married and put together, it's like, that's a bit dull, let's give on someone else. So, much more exciting this way. 2 different lives, 2 different people, business heads, and, both parents and all the complications that can bring. And then they have fun together.
We heard about Chelsea having an abortion not that long ago, and a lot of us applauded the BBC for covering that. But of course, Chelsea wasn't the first person in Ambridge to have an abortion. Elizabeth did. How did that feel? Because that was some time ago.
Yeah, it was. It was a very interesting storyline. It's so funny how, having been in it for 40 years, it's evolved like society, and it deals with societal issues. And obviously when Elizabeth decided upon an abortion, there were different connotations, because Shula said, please don't do it, I want the baby, I'll bring up the baby. So that was the angle, that was the drama that they were able to touch upon. With Chelsea, it was different. She's in, it's more present times, so her reasons were quite different from Elizabeth's. But anything that helps people to think differently, maybe, and question their own stance about certain issues, I think is helpful, and drama can do that so brilliantly. But you definitely get the for and against camps, and you need that conflict for people to discuss things that are contentious.
One character that certainly divided us into for and against was Russ. I mean, I was always very surprised at how tolerant Elizabeth was of their relationship, given the age difference. He was a teacher at her college. Were you surprised at how tolerant Elizabeth was written to be about that?
Yeah, I was, but I also knew at the same time, in parallel, we were heading towards her anxiety, panic attacks, depression. So that, when I said to you earlier about finding a subtext, a nuance, I think she was in such a mess that it was almost a degree of, well, if it keeps the peace and Lily's happy, I don't think she could take it on in any way, be judgmental, because she was crumbling inside. So that was my way. But I did, of course, my first reaction was, really, would she invite him in and what with this? But you find a way to play it for you. I don't know what the writers would feel, obviously perhaps differently, but that's what I hope I added to some of those scenes. And then, to be fair, Russ was the one that when she had the panic attack in the woods, I think it was, he dealt with it really well. And she did start to confide in him. I suppose there was a degree of trust then, and maybe she believed he would be good for Lily.
There's a lot of chatter suggesting that people thought that Elizabeth and Russ might get together.
Yeah, I can see, that they would.
Yeah.
At least they didn't have a throuple. We haven't done that storyline yet.
And were his paintings any good, Alison?
I'm, who knows?
In your head, were they any good?
Yeah, I think she did respect his artistic opinion. Hence, she, invited him into the gallery, etc., and listened to what he had to say. Yeah, why wouldn't she? He'd studied it. It wasn't her bag, for sure.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but with the whole mental health storyline, that is obviously you need to be aware of that happening in the back of your mind when you're acting for quite a long time. So, did they have that discussion with you quite early on and kind of say, a long way down the line, you are going to have this breakdown and counselling and everything, but you need to start adding it into
Yes.
how you're acting?
Yeah, Jeremy was very good, and we had a little meeting with Katie as well, who played Lily, because she was going to be picking up on her mother's kind of change within her, and we talked about it. So I was able to research a little bit and look for moments within the episodes that were written where I could attribute that, her spiraling sort of out of control and being really vulnerable, and that which is when those scenes with Kenton were great, because there were moments where she could explode in anger, or be really deeply kind of just shut down in a way that Elizabeth didn't used to be. She was a great fun girl. She was a lively younger woman, and then life starts to take over for all of us.
Well, Alison, before we come on to all the questions from our Facebook group, which is the extra content on YouTube, we do have a question that we ask every cast member, and it's about the subject of biscuits, because biscuits are very important to us on this podcast. What biscuit do you think would be Elizabeth's favourite?
Well, dare I say hobnob?
Yeah.
Or
that's Brian's as well.
Or maybe an oat cake. Nice, posh cheese.
Did you know that there's a biscuit called Nigel? There's a Sir Nigel marmalade shortbread round that you can get. So who knows? It could be a Nigel biscuit.
It's more flat than round now, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Quentin Rayner. Anyway, we move on to the Facebook questions.
Oh yes,
and there are lots, Alison's.
Okay, the first one, Alison, comes from Georgie, and they say, Alison, congratulations on your 40th anniversary this year in the show. Your youngest in real life is the same age as Lily and Freddie. Has that helped you be a parent to them?
Yes, Georgie, it has. And in fact, my youngest was used in one of the photos. I'd not long had him when I had some photos with the twins. One is mine for real, and one is my, pretend radio one. Yes, and it's definitely helped and is ongoing, because like they say, you're never not a parent, no matter how old they get.
True.
Oh, that's magic. I've got a question from Heather. In 25 to 30 years' time, will Elizabeth be the ultimate Archer's matriarch?
I hope so. Yeah, it's like I'm following the shoes of June and Paddy Green, June Spencer. It's such privilege, this show, because it's not the least bit ageist. It's great, as a jobbing actor and a woman, it's wonderful to be able to think that should they want me, I can still continue to play Elizabeth. I'd love to.
We hope so, because we all want to know who's going to inherit Lower Loxley, or who's going to run Lower Loxley when Elizabeth decides to retire. So yes,
and will she, or will she let go with those reins? That'll be
the whole story.
Does the primogeniture factor sort of really great with you? That
no, we're all equal. I mean, is how I feel. It's just we need to be able to speak freely.
Yeah,
that's all.
But the fact,
and have and for your voice.
But the fact that Freddie leapfrogs Lily in the inheritance, is that annoying?
Yeah, because it seems archaic, and the fact that it hasn't changed. And I mean, I don't know legally how you go about if you're even able to challenge it.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
That's a whole other story.
That's a whole other storyline, isn't it?
Yeah.
Alison, the next question is from Dorothy, who asks, Alison, were you ever in the Archers before? Because some cast members are.
Yeah,
right.
Judy was. Judy played Elizabeth, who played Shula. Yeah. But I think Elizabeth the First.
Great.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions about Roy. for you, Alison. First from Sally. I'll ask them both.
Okay.
Sally asks, did Elizabeth enjoy going to the summer festival with Roy, and did she wish they stayed longer as a couple? And Ivory adds, how did you feel about the sad demise of Roy, the actor? Ian, in other words.
Yeah. I'll start with that, and I think I speak for everyone in the cast. We were all desperately upset because he was, his life was cut short. He was far too young, and he was a glorious man, and obviously a really fine actor and a lovely person to work with. But none of us know our date when the time's up, and he had such courage. My last phone conversation with him, he said, which it will stay with me, he said, I don't mind. I've lived. I've got no regrets. I did everything I wanted to do, and I did bags of it. And he said, it's okay. And that sort of courage, when you're in good health, I can't imagine ever being as brave as he was. So yes, I think we all miss him terribly.
Yeah.
And in terms of our time at the festivals, they were great scenes, great fun. But I think Elizabeth knew it had to come to an end once she saw the ramifications with Hayley and Phoebe.
Yeah.
And because it was a relationship of passion, maybe she just felt it was easier to end it for him because he didn't have to then. So it was like, no, we must stop, go back to your wife and daughter.
Yeah.
It's a hard one, isn't it? But I like to think that's why she stopped it, because she knew it was messing up too many other people's lives. Ultimately, it was selfish, but they needed it.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Our next question's from Tilda, and she said, does Alison think that Elizabeth and Vince are well suited for each other?
The writing certainly suggests they are, like lots of relationships on the level that we're hearing, that we're witnessing. They get along like a house on fire. They have a great time, and I think he's loosened her up a lot, and he's bringing back a lot of the old Elizabeth. I remember, when I first started playing her, he's igniting that spark in her again, and the sense of fun and daring. And also they've got two good business heads, so there's stimulation there when they help each other out and play devil's advocate. So yes, Tilda, I think they're having a great time together. Certainly off there, because you're not hearing it on air at the moment, but that's what I'm living. Yeah.
The next question is from Angie, who asks a food-related question. Given that Elizabeth was married to an erstwhile ice cream man, does Alison like ice cream? And if so, what is her favourite flavour? Does it have biscuits crumbled in?
No, I'm very simple pleasures. Strawberry. And I tell you, it's really damn hard to find strawberry ice cream. You get strawberry cheesecake, strawberry ripple, strawberry with God knows what thrown in it. I just want strawberry ice cream. It's obviously not in vogue at the moment. But yeah, that's me.
I'm sure at Bridge Farm they'll sell it in the dairy if you get on their intercom window and ask.
And she's partial to Mr. Whippy now and again.
Oh.
Right. Andy says two-hander episodes are rare in The Archers, and I'm sure carry a lot of pressure for the actors. What are Alison's recollections of the therapy session, given the importance and weight of the matter, and also it being pivotal in the life of Elizabeth?
Thank you, Andy. I felt enormous responsibility doing that episode. I was terrified. I'd not done like a solo episode before. The subject matter was such and written so well, I believe, by Tim Stimpson, the writer, that really helped and made it easier. And it was a great arc to be able to begin the episode, go through all those emotional layers till she broke down at the end, and the relief. And I sounds weird, but I really enjoyed the challenge as an actor doing it, and the journey that I took. And Kim, one of our directors, was terrific because she didn't pressure me, she gave me enough time. And it was really lovely because it also, for me, it was a chance to step back in Elizabeth's head and go through all the things she was saying, all the things she remembered about the children when they were little, and Nigel, and the anger and the loss. And it just all came flooding out, and it did. In moments of that recording, I very much felt I inhabited Elizabeth more than I had done for many, many years. I was right there with her.
That's wonderful.
I think those episodes, when they happen, I think it's a great chance for the listener to get a deeper insight into the character, and for the actor to have a chance to
and that's why
challenge.
That's why the some of the monologues were so successful, I think, for that reason as well. Not all of them, but some of them were.
Yes. Yeah, agree.
It feels special to have that little insight, that extra insight, rather than just your little snippets in the 13-minute episods. It's wonderful.
Like a little radio play. It's in itself. It has a proper beginning, middle, and end, and you go on a journey. A bit like a podcast. You're there, aren't you, Shane?
Yeah, definitely. I've got a little group of questions about Nigel. So again, I'll read them all out. Nikki has said, if Nigel hadn't fallen off the roof, do you think Lizzie and Nigel would have lived happily ever after, or would there have been roving eyes from either of them? Rob's asked, how much advance notice did you get of Nigel/Graham's departure? Did you know before or after he was told? And Adrian said, what was it like saying goodbye to Graham Seed when Nigel was so cruelly written out?
Okay, I knew after Graham found out, which is as it should be, but not, I think, probably a month in advance, trying to remember back. In terms of would they still be together, I like to think yes. Like all good marriages, they'd have worked at it. He was an outrageous flirt, but she knows how to flirt too. So she'd, I think they would have, stayed together. I don't think she would have tired of him because he always made her laugh. And what was the other question?
About saying goodbye to Graham Seed, and what was it like?
It was like a party because the BBC did a lovely framed picture for him. They made speeches, there was a cake, everyone was together. So there was that lovely moment in the spotlight where obviously Graham must have been feeling desperately unhappy about it because, no jobbing actor wants to lose their job. And also it's a job that you think you hope will take you into retirement, and you've made lifelong friends with people. So it's hard. It's it's hard to then go on and play those scenes. But the actual departure on the day in the studio was joyous. Because everyone said, you've done a wonderful job and it's been lovely working with you, and gave him cards and presents. But you must never define yourself by one job, even when you've done 40 years. And that's what we have to hold on to as actors, as part of the cast of The Archers, is we are all freelance. We're booked on that basis. And I've been lucky enough to do it for 40 years. But at the beginning, when I started, I was booked that month and hoped I'd get booked the next month. And it's still the same. So at any given point, it's our life in the hands of those that make the decisions about what the programme needs and which way it goes.
How are your nerves, Alison?
I've maintained that attitude to the programme. I really have, because it's something that people like Norman told me at the beginning, don't take you for granted when you have a good run and you're in lots of episodes and it's very exciting. That would last. So as long as you see it that way, I think, no harm done.
Yeah.
The next question is from Dorothy, and they ask a question I was going to ask you if it hadn't been raised here. How do you justify Elizabeth being with Vince after he almost destroyed Ben?
Passion. Got passion, hasn't it?
Fair enough.
How do you like that?
Okay. Some questions now lumped together about Freddie and Lily. Okay. Would it be easier if I asked them separately or all in one go?
Yes, separately.
Right. So the first one comes from Dawn, and she says, Freddie seems to have matured a great deal recently. Despite Elizabeth's obvious satisfaction at being in charge, would she now support him against the trustees should they doubt his ability to run Lower Loxley?
Well, Ali says yes, but the writers might disagree. That's the answer.
Okay.
Might get my backing, really, and I'm sure, yeah, I don't know. But that's, yeah, I feel that he's proved himself and moved on, and, you know, the past is the past. Yeah.
Okay. Andy says, what difference, if any, did it make to Alison's performance as Elizabeth, the mother of twins, when two young actors turn up to breathe life into previously silent, invisible children? Also, did she have any say in the selection process for the two superb actors?
No, nothing to do with me who got selected. And usually all the actors that come along and audition are of a very good standard. So I don't make that decision. They are gorgeous and really nice to work with. And I was thrilled because once you're just Elizabeth, you need your other characters around you. And the stories that can be written for a mother and her children are very interesting because they're what so many people are going through on a daily basis. So they're very relatable. And it allowed Elizabeth to grow and mature as well, you know, in a way that you haven't heard before on air. And I like to think a lot of parents were going through similar things. Hopefully not their son going to prison, but, you know,
Yes.
that whole kind of drinking, drug, relationship issues. Will you go to uni? Won't you? Yeah.
But it was, I saw also behind his questions, was it strange suddenly them having a voice when before you were just referring to them by name?
No, because they were so perfect. It just immediately felt like, yes, of course that's Lily, of course that's Freddie. They're just instant. Yeah. And they're both really, as you said, the listener said, very good actors and have taken to it. And, you know, I like to think I've helped to make them, you know, those relationships work really quickly. And I filled them in on lots of stuff from the past that they wouldn't necessarily know, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Question from Derek. Is Alison anything like her character in real life? And he's added that it's his favourite character and you're brilliant.
Oh, thank you, Derek. Because as an actor, you always think, oh, they hate my character. Especially when you get some scenes and you think, oh, no, they're going to hate me for this. Like I say, I don't write it. Yeah, there's a bit of me there in her. Certainly when I first started, because you haven't lived a lot, so that tantromic behaviour that she used to have, demanding her own bathroom with Phil and Jill, and all the naughty trouble she got up with in Nelson's wine bar, all of that stuff. I was running parallel with that. And then later on, going through motherhood, like I say, certain tragedies, loss, they're all of life's experiences, and I've gone through them. So I suppose when I'm playing those scenes as Elizabeth, there's a good bit of my experience that I put into hers, you know, because that's the most truth and the authenticity that I can add. If it's something I've lived through, I think I know this. I know how I reacted. How would Lizzie react, and what bits of the way I reacted can I put into her? You know,
Thank you. The last Facebook question is from Heather, and we've already heard which sibling you would play if you weren't playing Elizabeth. Heather asked, which other Archer's character would Alison most like to play if she wasn't Elizabeth Pargetter?
The cast, any Archer's
yes,
cast. I'm afraid I would have to go back in time, because I think these characters were written so brilliantly, and it's at a time when also the program was different. It's evolved, which it has to, and changes, and the cast is huge now. But when I first started 40 years ago, there were two characters that I absolutely adored, and that was Nelson Gabriel and Marjorie Antrobus. So well written and defined. And you could have those two characters talking about farming, rural life, gossip, family, love, sex over a G&T in Nelson's wine bar, and you needed nothing else. and it was done with such lightness of touch. It was pure gold. It wasn't sensational. It was just two people sharing a drink and a chat. But the character-driven elements were such that, yeah, they stayed in my heart. So yes, if I'm gender neutral, I'd like to be Nelson Gabriel. Otherwise, I'll be Marjorie Antrobus, please.
Well, we come to the very final bit of our chat today, Alison, and this is where we ask a question that's posed to you from the last cast member we interviewed.
Okay.
And the last person we interviewed was Tim, who plays...
Plenty.
Yes,
Oh,
who
nice.
plays David Archer. And Tim says, please tell Alison how much I love doing scenes with my little sis.
Oh,
And
well, the feelings mutual.
and he says, what do you prefer, being David's sister or a Dothraki screamer?
I'm greedy. I like both. I really had to pick. Most definitely David's sister. Yeah, I'm so lucky that I work with Tim a lot outside of the program. He's real. He's champion. Yeah. And as Mr. Archer, I think Norman would agree with me were he here to say so. He's doing a fine job as Mr. Archer.
Oh, yes. Tim said that you and he have done many sessions on Games of Thrones, or as you like to,
Yes.
as it's been renamed, Games of Throats, I think, with all the screaming.
Yes. Yeah, we're both pretty good screamers. It's very cathartic, going just choo-choo.
Quite,
Yeah, and that's why I love doing, video games and things like that, because there's no end of characters, from a witch to a goddess to a child to whatever. It's great. Very creative.
Oh, well, Alison, it's just been so wonderful to talk to
Thank
you
you,
and
yes.
hear more about Elizabeth. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yes.
And thank you to all the listeners that wrote questions. Lovely. I hope I've answered them.
You have, yeah. Yes.
And keep listening. And thank you especially to the person who said I'm his favourite character.